Sarah Martinez walked through the hospital corridors with her head held high, despite the whispers that followed her everywhere. The other nurses would stop their conversations when she passed by, their eyes immediately drawn to the intricate tattoo that covered most of her left arm. It wasn't the colorful design that bothered them, but what they thought it represented. The tattoo showed a detailed military scene with helicopters, soldiers, and what appeared to be a battlefield. Most people who saw it assumed Sarah was trying to show off or pretend she had served in the military when she clearly hadn't. The gossip spread quickly through the hospital where she worked as a trauma nurse. "She's probably one of those people who gets military tattoos to look tough," whispered Jessica, another nurse, during their lunch break. "My brother actually served overseas, and he says it's disrespectful when civilians get tattoos like that." Sarah heard these comments almost daily, but she never responded. She would simply continue with her work, treating patients with the same dedication and skill that had made her one of the best trauma nurses in the hospital. Her silence only made people more suspicious. The tattoo had cost her more than money. When she first got it 5 years ago, her family questioned her decision. Her mother had cried, asking why she would mark her body with something so violent and dark. Her friends didn't understand either. Even some of her colleagues at previous jobs had made uncomfortable jokes about it. But Sarah kept the real story to herself. She had learned early on that explaining the truth was often more painful than letting people believe their own assumptions. The few times she had tried to share the real meaning behind the tattoo, people either didn't believe her or looked at her with pity. She preferred the whispers about her being fake over the uncomfortable sympathy. The tattoo artist had spent over 20 hours creating the detailed scene on her arm. Every line, every shadow, every small detail had been carefully planned and executed. It wasn't just random military imagery thrown together for effect. Each element had a specific meaning, a specific memory attached to it. Sarah remembered the day she had walked into the tattoo parlor with a folder full of photographs and sketches. The artist, Marcus, had looked through everything carefully before agreeing to take on the project. "This is going to be emotionally difficult," he had warned her. "Working on pieces like this always brings up a lot of feelings. Are you sure you're ready for that?" She had been ready then, and she was still ready now, even as her coworkers continued to judge her for it. The tattoo served as both a reminder and a tribute, something that kept an important part of her life alive even when she wanted to forget. Dr. Roberts, the head of the trauma department, had never said anything directly about Sarah's tattoo, but she caught him looking at it sometimes with a confused expression. She was one of his best nurses, always calm under pressure, with an unusual ability to handle the most severe trauma cases. Her experience with blood, chaos, and life-or-death situations seemed almost natural, which made the military tattoo even more puzzling to those who worked with her. The breaking point came on a particularly busy Friday night. The emergency room was flooded with victims from a multi-car accident on the highway. Sarah was working alongside Dr. Roberts and 2 other nurses when a patient was brought in with severe injuries that reminded everyone of battlefield trauma. As they worked to stabilize the patient, Dr. Roberts noticed how Sarah moved with practiced precision, her hands steady as she assisted with procedures that would make most people sick. She anticipated his needs before he asked, organized equipment with military efficiency, and remained completely calm even when the patient's condition worsened. "Where did you learn to work like that?" Dr. Roberts asked during a brief break between patients. "Experience," Sarah replied simply, rolling down her sleeves to cover the tattoo as she always did when the workday was ending. But Dr. Roberts had been thinking about Sarah's unusual skills for weeks. Her ability to handle trauma, her calm demeanor under pressure, and the way she seemed to understand emergency situations from a different perspective than other nurses. Combined with the military tattoo that everyone gossiped about, he was starting to form his own theories about Sarah's background. The hospital's annual charity event was approaching, and this year they were honoring local veterans and their families. Dr. Roberts was on the planning committee, and he had an idea that might finally solve the mystery surrounding Sarah Martinez and her controversial tattoo. He began making phone calls to military contacts he knew from his years working in trauma medicine. Many wounded soldiers had passed through their emergency room, and he had developed relationships with several military liaisons. If Sarah had served, there would be records. If she hadn't, he would know that too. What Dr. Roberts discovered in his research would change everything. The phone calls led to emails, which led to official documents, which led to a story that no one at the hospital could have imagined. Sarah's tattoo wasn't about pretending to be something she wasn't. It was about honoring something she could never forget, something that had shaped her entire life and career. The truth was more complex and more heartbreaking than anyone had guessed. Sarah's connection to the military was real, but not in the way people assumed. The scenes depicted in her tattoo weren't fantasy or stolen valor. They were memories, carefully preserved in ink, of events that had changed her life forever. As Dr. Roberts prepared for the charity event, he realized he had a choice to make. He could keep Sarah's secret, or he could find a way to honor the truth behind her tattoo in a way that would finally silence the whispers and give her the respect she deserved. The decision he made would expose not only the real meaning behind Sarah's tattoo but also reveal a story of sacrifice, love, and loss that would leave everyone who heard it speechless. The woman they had all misjudged was about to be revealed as someone far braver and more honorable than any of them had imagined. The night of the charity event arrived, and the hospital's main conference room was decorated with flags and photos honoring local military families. Sarah had volunteered to work that evening, preferring to stay busy in the emergency room rather than attend the celebration. She never participated in military appreciation events, always finding excuses to be somewhere else. Dr. Roberts took the stage as the evening's main speaker. The audience included hospital staff, local veterans, military families, and community supporters. He began with the usual thanks and acknowledgments before his tone became more personal. "Tonight, I want to tell you about someone who works among us every day," Dr. Roberts said, his voice carrying through the quiet room. "Someone whose story of sacrifice and service has been hidden in plain sight, misunderstood by those of us who thought we knew better." In the emergency room, Sarah continued working, unaware that her life was about to change. She was checking on a patient when her phone buzzed with messages from coworkers asking where she was and saying she needed to hear what Dr. Roberts was saying at the event. "Sarah Martinez has worked as a trauma nurse in our hospital for 3 years," Dr. Roberts continued. "Many of you have seen the military tattoo on her arm. Most of us assumed we understood what it meant. We were wrong." He clicked to the first slide of his presentation, showing a photograph that made several people in the audience gasp. It was an image of a young man in military uniform, smiling confidently at the camera. The resemblance to Sarah was unmistakable. "This is Staff Sergeant David Martinez, Sarah's older brother. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic." The tattoo on Sarah's arm doesn't represent stolen valor or false military pride. It's a memorial to her brother, who died saving the lives of 4 fellow soldiers when their convoy was attacked by insurgents. The room fell completely silent. Dr. Roberts had everyone's attention now, and he could see some people looking uncomfortable as they realized their assumptions about Sarah had been completely wrong. "But David's death isn't the whole story," Dr. Roberts continued. "Sarah was 22 when she got the call that her brother had been killed. She had been planning to become a teacher, but David's death changed everything. She enrolled in nursing school specifically to become a trauma nurse, wanting to honor his memory by saving lives the way he had tried to do." The presentation continued with more photos and documents that Dr. Roberts had obtained through his military contacts. There were images of David receiving commendations for bravery, letters he had written home to Sarah, and official reports detailing the battle where he died. Every element of Sarah's tattoo represents a specific detail from the reports of David's final mission, Dr. Roberts explained. The helicopter represents the medical evacuation he called for his wounded teammates. The soldiers represent the 4 men whose lives he saved. The battlefield scene represents the place where he made the ultimate sacrifice. Sarah's phone was now buzzing constantly with calls and messages. Finally, she stepped away from her patient and answered a call from her friend Maria, who was at the event. Sarah, you need to get to the conference room right now, Maria whispered urgently. Dr. Roberts is telling everyone about David. About your tattoo. About everything. Sarah's heart stopped. She had never told anyone at the hospital about her brother except in the vaguest terms. How had Dr. Roberts learned the truth? And why was he sharing it with everyone without her permission? The scenes in Sarah's tattoo aren't just artistic representations, Dr. Roberts was saying as Sarah hurried toward the conference room. They're based on actual photographs and eyewitness accounts from David's final mission. She spent months researching every detail, interviewing his surviving teammates, and working with the tattoo artist to create an accurate memorial. Sarah reached the back of the conference room just as Dr. Roberts was showing a photo of her tattoo alongside military photographs from David's deployment. The similarities were striking and clearly not coincidental. Sarah has endured 3 years of whispers and judgment from people who assumed she was disrespecting the military, Dr. Roberts said, his voice growing stronger. In reality, she has honored her brother's sacrifice every single day, carrying his story on her skin and dedicating her career to saving lives in his memory. The audience was completely silent now, and Sarah could see some of her coworkers wiping their eyes. Jessica, the nurse who had been most vocal about criticizing the tattoo, was crying openly. The skills that make Sarah such an exceptional trauma nurse didn't come from textbooks alone, Dr. Roberts continued. After David's death, she spent her summer breaks during nursing school volunteering at VA hospitals, learning from combat medics who had served with her brother. She studied battlefield medicine, not to pretend she was a soldier, but to understand the work her brother had died doing. Dr. Roberts then shared something that surprised even Sarah. He had contacted several of David's surviving teammates, and 2 of them had agreed to join the presentation by video call. The screen filled with the face of Sergeant First Class Mike Thompson, who was calling from his home in Colorado. Sarah gasped when she saw him. She had met Mike once, at David's funeral, but hadn't spoken to him since. Dave Martinez was the bravest man I ever served with, Mike said, his voice clear through the speakers. When our convoy was hit, he could have stayed in cover. Instead, he ran into enemy fire 4 separate times to drag wounded soldiers to safety. He died on the 4th trip, trying to reach our driver who was trapped in the burning vehicle. Another veteran, Corporal James Lee, joined the call from North Carolina. Dave talked about his little sister all the time, James said. He was so proud of her, always showing us pictures and letters. He would be amazed to know she became a nurse to honor his memory. Sarah stood frozen at the back of the room, tears streaming down her face. She had never expected her private tribute to become public, and she wasn't sure how she felt about it. Dr. Roberts concluded his presentation with one final revelation. Sarah has never sought recognition for her sacrifice or her brother's service. She has quietly done her job, saved countless lives, and endured unfair judgment with dignity. Tonight, I want everyone to know that the woman we've been whispering about is actually a hero in her own right. The audience erupted in applause, and people began turning to look for Sarah. She tried to slip out of the room, but several co-workers had spotted her and were approaching with tears in their eyes and apologies on their lips. Jessica reached her first. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I had no idea. The things I said about your tattoo, about you. I feel terrible." One by one, Sarah's colleagues came to apologize and thank her for her service to their patients and the memory of her brother. The gossip and judgment that had followed her for years was replaced by respect and admiration. Dr. Roberts found Sarah in the hospital cafeteria an hour later, sitting alone with a cup of coffee. She looked up when he approached, her expression unreadable. "I should have asked your permission before sharing your story," he said, sitting across from her. "I apologize for that. But I couldn't stand watching people disrespect you when they had no idea what that tattoo really means." Sarah was quiet for a long moment before responding. "David always said that the truth has a way of coming out when it's supposed to," she finally said. "Maybe it was time. Your brother would be proud of the nurse you've become," Dr. Roberts said. And proud of how you've honored his memory. Sarah looked down at her tattoo, running her fingers over the detailed artwork that had caused her so much trouble but meant everything to her. He wanted to save lives, she said softly. I figured this was the closest I could get to carrying on his work. The story of Sarah's tattoo spread throughout the hospital and into the wider community. She became something of a local hero, interviewed by newspapers and invited to speak at veterans' events. But for Sarah, the most important change was that she could finally wear her memorial proudly, without hiding the true meaning behind it. The whispers stopped, replaced by respectful nods and grateful smiles from colleagues who now understood that the woman they had misjudged was actually someone extraordinary. Sarah's tattoo was no longer a source of gossip but a symbol of love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond between siblings who serve in different ways. Years later, when new employees would ask about the detailed military tattoo on Sarah's arm, their colleagues would proudly tell them the true story behind it, ensuring that both Sarah and David Martinez would be remembered and honored for their service to others.